Hi, welcome to another video. Today we are going to talk about the 9 most dangerous countries in the world. So stay tuned. In this video, I'm not going to beat around the bush. I'll just go straight to the point. Number 1 on this list is Venezuela. Venezuela has one of the highest homicide rates in the world. In 2021, there were homicides at a rate of 40.9 incidents per 100,000 people. In Venezuela, in the year 2021, about 94.5% of the population was in poverty based on income, out of which 76.6% lived under extreme poverty, the highest figure ever recorded in the country. In Venezuela, there is a high threat from violent crime and kidnapping throughout the country, which has one of the highest murder rates in the world. Armed robbery, mugging, carjacking, and burglary are all common, and are often accompanied by extreme levels of violence. I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. Venezuela is a very dangerous place, especially in cities such as Caracas and Maracaibo. In fact, political instability, police corruption, lack of gun control, and a dismantled legal system have catapulted Venezuela's crime index to 83.76, the highest on the planet when it comes to poverty. Venezuela spiked during 2019, officially rendering it the poorest country in Latin America and the Caribbean. Since 2015, more than 7 million Venezuelans have emigrated to other countries due to ongoing economic and political turmoil. According to the United Nations Refugee Agency, the Venezuelan exodus, representing a quarter of Venezuela's population, is the world's second-largest refugee crisis. If you are a tourist and thinking about going to Venezuela, you need to avoid displaying expensive jewelry, electronic items, or other valuables. And make sure to not bring large amounts of cash as well, or else you will get murdered. And you definitely need to avoid traveling on the road between Caracas and Maiquetía Airport after dark. There have been armed robberies on buses traveling to Maiquetía Airport. And number 2 on this list is Papua New Guinea. Before I talk about how dangerous is Papua New Guinea, if you've never heard about this country before, Papua New Guinea is an island country that lies in the southwestern Pacific. It includes the eastern half of New Guinea and many small offshore islands. Its neighbors include Indonesia to the west, Australia to the south, and Solomon Islands to the southeast. Right now, Papua New Guinea is very dangerous. If you are a tourist, then you need to keep the doors and windows locked in your hotel or apartment, including when traveling by vehicle. For now, I don't recommend anyone to go over there, but if you need to go there for some reason, then consider using private security, because civil unrest and violent intergroup and tribal conflict is extremely common and can increase without warning. But in order to be safe, you need to avoid protests, demonstrations, political rallies, and areas where tribal fighting is taking place, or else you'll be in trouble. Papua New Guinea is not a big country. It has about 9 million people. But violent crime, such as sexual assault, carjacking, home invasion, kidnapping, and armed robbery, is extremely common, and the thieves over there uses dangerous lethal weapons such as firearms or machetes. The Highlands provinces and the cities of Lae and Port Moresby are the most dangerous. If you love traveling, I honestly wouldn't recommend this country, because criminals tend to target areas and establishments often frequented by foreigners, including hotels, clubs, restaurants, and bars. And these crazy criminals even target schools or churches, but they mostly target tourist areas, including markets, parks, and beaches. Number 3 on this list is South Africa. During the last 3 months of 2022, around 83 people were murdered in South Africa every day. The murder rate increased rapidly in the late 80s and early 90s. In 2001, a South African was more likely to be murdered than die in a car crash, but the murder rate halved between 1994 and 2009 from 67 to 34 murders per 100,000 people. Between 2011 and 2015, it stabilized to around 32 homicides per 100,000 people, although the total number of lives lost had increased due to the increase in population. In the 2016-17 year, the rate of murders increased to 52 a day, with 19,016 murders recorded between April 2016 to March 2017. The Eastern Cape, Western Cape and KwaZulu-Natal provinces have the highest murder rates in the country. At the release of the crime stats for Q3 2022, the police minister Becky Cele said that 7,555 murders were recorded during the period, marking a 10% increase year-on-year. Sexual offenses also increased by 9.6%, rising from 14,188 to 15,545. Rape, 9.8%, sexual assault, 4.1%, and attempted sexual offenses, 45.6%, also increased. Crime in South Africa is rampant, and the rule of law is barely worth mentioning. Private citizens have to pay private security firms to secure their homes, businesses, and communities. And this is not always effective. Farmers are regularly being attacked, tortured, and murdered execution style, and the government and police force claim these are robberies first, and the murders are a secondary consequence. The brutality would suggest otherwise. In the poorer communities, it is even worse, and many crimes go unreported. The police force is severely understaffed, undertrained, and in many cases corrupt. Number 4 on this list is Afghanistan. More than 76 crimes are committed in Afghanistan for every 100,000 people. The crime has various forms, including corruption, assassinations, drug trafficking, kidnapping, and money laundering. There's an ongoing and very high threat of terrorist attacks throughout Afghanistan, including in Kabul. Attacks can occur anywhere and at any time. If you are a tourist, you should not travel to Afghanistan because the security situation remains extremely volatile. There is an ongoing and high threat of terrorist attacks, including around the airport. If you are a tourist, I would not encourage you to visit Afghanistan as a tourist unless you have family or other close connections there. All potential tourist attractions and transportation hubs are targets for attack. I would not travel there as a tourist. If you have family to visit or are there on work business, then you may have more important reasons to visit, even though it is still extremely dangerous. Otherwise, for leisure travel, I wouldn't expect much in terms of leisure. It's still too dangerous and not secure. As of May 2023, the UK Foreign and Commonwealth Office, FCO, advises against travel to the whole of Afghanistan. Following the pullout of all American troops in August 2021, the Afghan security forces and government immediately collapsed, and the Taliban returned to power. Risks to travelers in Afghanistan include terrorism, warfare, criminality, and kidnapping. Tourism in the nation is seriously threatened by the presence of terrorist organizations like the Taliban and the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, ISIS. Number 5 on this list is Honduras. Honduras is a very poor country, and many times people from poor families decide that joining gangs and killing for money is the only way to eat. Honduras has been known to be a dangerous country due to a combination of factors such as poverty, political instability, and organized crime. The country faces high levels of violence and crime, which has contributed to its reputation as one of the most dangerous countries in the world. Violent crime, such as homicide, armed robbery, and kidnapping, is common. Violent gang activity, such as extortion, violent street crime, rape, and narcotics and human trafficking, is widespread. Local police and emergency services lack sufficient resources to respond effectively to serious crime. Crime in Honduras has become a growing matter of concern for the Honduran population in recent years. Honduras has experienced alarmingly high levels of violence and criminal activity, with homicide rates reaching a peak in 2012, averaging 20 homicides per day. Corruption, extortion, coercion, and drug smuggling also run rampant throughout Honduran society. One of the major factors behind the country's high crime rates is the presence of powerful and violent criminal organizations involved in drug trafficking, extortion, and other illegal activities. These groups often engage in violent confrontations with each other and with law enforcement agencies, resulting in high levels of homicide and other violent crimes. Furthermore, political instability and corruption have also played a role in creating a dangerous environment in Honduras. Political and economic elites have been known to exploit the system for their own gain, while the government has struggled to effectively address the country's security challenges. And number 6 on this list is Trinidad and Tobago. The violent crime rate in Trinidad is 38.57 incidents per 100,000 people, which is much higher than the global average. The crime is terrible, which is getting worse year by year. Robberies, car thefts, kidnapping, and human trafficking is the norm. Murders were limited to gang warfare, but it's now being spread to normal civilians. By 7 or 8 p.m., you need to be indoors with your house locked. The cause of crime is high unemployment rate. Young people are unemployed or underemployed. There are highly qualified young people who cannot get a job or taking menial jobs or jobs they are not qualified to do. People with master's degrees are bag packets in supermarkets, and most get frustrated and end up getting into crime. Trinidad is a petrochemical-based economy. Their economy reflects the global price of oil and gas, so there is always an upswing and downward spiral in the economy. However, there has been no attempt in diversifying their revenue so they can weather low oil and gas prices. This then leads to more unemployment and crime. Most of this crime is gun-related violence, mostly gang-related murders. It is not easily solvable because they have porous borders, so that there is a huge proliferation of guns coming in at every possible entry point. The general population do not have ease of access to firearms licenses. But this is not the issue. Detection rate is poor. I agree that it is a lovely Caribbean country with nice beaches, attractions, great food, and nightlife entertainment. However, it is important to be aware that in recent months, there has been an increase in robbery and violent crimes, especially against women, including rape and murder. The crime is horrible, and it's getting worse every year. The police force, the government, everyone seems to be at a loss how to combat it. There's lack of faith in anything government, even down to the police force. If something happens to you from robberies to murder to rape, you know the police isn't going to do anything for you or that you're going to get justice. This leads to people taking the law into their own hands. Number 7 on this list is Guyana. Guyana has a highest crime rate worldwide of 68.74 and a murder rate of about 4 times higher than that of the United States. Despite a rigorous licensing requirement to own firearms, the use of weapons by criminals is common. In Guyana, a lot of teens are suffering from peer pressure. There are a lot of teens who are persuaded by their peers to commit petty crimes, and sometimes serious ones too. And another problem with this country is lack of family education. Some individuals grow in delinquent and dysfunctional families, and even communities such as Buxton, Tiger Bay, Albuistown, and so on. But the main problem is jobs. There aren't a lot of job opportunities in the country. So some individuals believe that society is corrupted and tend to commit crime to assist with their survival. And what's shocking is the suicide and murder rates. Recently, there has been a surge in suicide, especially due to infidelity and anger control issues. Some individuals are uneducated and take matters to their own hands instead of seeking counseling. They also have a huge drug trafficking problem. There has been an increase in drug trafficking in the country. Guyana's economy is small, and middle-class individuals can only work to provide for their basic needs. So most people feel like they are not earning enough, so they decide to make quick and dirty money. Number 8 on this list is El Salvador. El Salvador homicide rate in 2022 was 1.4 per day, or 7.8 homicides per 100,000 inhabitants. The Salvadoran government reported that 2022 closed with 495 murders, a reduction of 56.84% compared to 2021. 2022 ended as the safest year in Salvadoran history since the end of the Civil War. For those who don't know, El Salvador has suffered from gang violence and wars for decades. Young men have been joining gangs for decades because of poverty, bad education systems, and corruption. Salvadoran young men decide to join a gang for several reasons. Sometimes this is understood as a choice, but other motivations include feeling neglected and abandoned by family or feeling they don't belong anywhere except where violence occurs. El Salvador is home to 2 major gangs that terrorize the population: especially in poorer areas. These gangs have about 500,000 members or people that cooperate with their crimes. These gangs kill civilians, police officers, soldiers, and themselves. They actually originated in Southern California by Salvadoran immigrants who were later deported back to El Salvador. Gangs contribute to the generally high levels of social violence in El Salvador. They engage in various serious criminal acts which terrorize and paralyze society. Homicide and extortion are the most publicized crimes. There are different forms of violence constructed in El Salvador, such as political, gender, and structural violence. Women and children have been particular targets of violence, torture, and abuse. The government needs to find a way to improve education, raise jobs, and get kids off of the streets to improve the standard of living. Just tackling the gangs head-on won't solve everything. Number 9 on this list is Brazil. You're probably aware that Brazil is a dangerous place with a high murder rate. Recent data shows that Brazil recorded 40,824 homicides in 2022, an average of 111 violent deaths per day. This is high, the equivalent of 1 out of every 5 homicides in the world occurring in Brazil. Brazil has long been the world leader in overall homicides, and its murder rate is also one of the highest. Security groups are raising the alarm about the continued rise in killings. There were 61,597 homicides in 2016 after several years below 60,000. A new study in Brazil says the murder rate for young people has soared in the last 30 years. About 4 of every 10 people murdered are Brazilian youth. Most of the victims are engaged in criminal activities or close to someone who is in a way or another. Nonetheless, ordinary people are also occasionally killed as collateral damage. What fuels violence in Brazil is by far the drug trade, and a large percentage of violent crimes can be traced all the way back to it. Severe problems with inequality and general distrust towards the authorities due to corruption make Brazil the perfect kind of country for this kind of activity to flourish. Couple that with the fact that drugs sell very well, and the result is obvious. The current situation is the natural consequence of the state failing to provide all of its citizens with opportunities and safety, and from this failure, powerful criminal factions are born. Crime rises, and the government fights back by waging war against these factions. But the general population, especially the poor, are caught between the fire, which results more distrust and anger towards the police and the state. This is the end of the video. If you disagree with anything I've said in this video, please comment below and I'll reply as soon as possible. Thanks for watching. And please don't forget to like and subscribe.